Mariette woke up 5 minutes before her alarm clock rang, as usual. Duck was snoring next to her, his arm draped across her stomach. She carefully slipped out from under his heavy arm and hurried to the bathroom. She couldn't be late. She had 3 deliveries today, and the first one was on the other side of town. Quietly getting ready in the kitchen, she heard her husband shuffle to the bathroom. He would be back to bed soon. His workday started at 10 when the garage warmed up. The lathe required a certain temperature. Oatmeal again? Duck appeared in the kitchen in his boxers, scratching his hairy chest. What do you want with the money you bring home? Mariette shrugged. Want some? Nah, I'll eat later. She knew exactly what later meant. He'd pop into the diner near the garage and get his favorite burger. He always had money for burgers, even though he was bringing less and less home. Maybe you should get a job at the factory, she suggested for the umpteenth time. The Petersons are hiring lathe operators, Jim said. Work for my uncle? Her husband snorted. Everything's fine in my garage. Mariette said nothing. The last year had been tough. There were fewer private orders, and Duck often messed up the ones he did get. Either a part would break or the dimensions would be wrong. That never used to happen. Okay, I've got to run, she said, kissing her husband on the cheek. Don't forget to pay the electricity bill. Uh-huh, he grunted and reached into the refrigerator. A dispatcher's day is scheduled down to the minute. Mariette loved her job. A small home goods company with 3 trucks and 7 employees, including the director. The pay was modest but steady, and the team was good. Hi, honey. Sarah, the sales manager, met her at the entrance. How are you? How's Duck? Fine, Mariette smiled. What do we have today? 3 deliveries. The first is a large order of lamps for a new restaurant. The day flew by. Mariette loaded the last batch of goods and headed home. On the way, she stopped at the store to buy groceries for dinner. She was short on cash until payday, but she loved to cook. Maybe she could convince her husband to have dinner at home. The garage greeted her with the familiar clanking of the machine. Duck was working late, which was good news. That meant he had an order. Did you bring dinner? I'll make it right away. New order? Yeah, urgent, he frowned. Listen, here's the thing. I'll have to ask for an advance. Again? She sighed. What for this time? I need some materials, special ones. I can't do without them. Mariette silently took out her wallet. Lately, it had become a tradition. Urgent orders that required money for materials. She didn't ask where the money went. Dak got angry when she tried to pry into his business. Will you pay me back? She asked, handing him the bills. Sure, he said, shoving the money into his pocket and turning back to the machine. Don't start dinner yet, I'll be a while. She went upstairs. The house was small and old, but it was theirs. They had been paying off the mortgage for 5 years. Some of the rooms needed repairs. The wallpaper in the bedroom was peeling, but there was never enough money for that. Turning on the TV for background noise, Mariette began to cook. Maybe Duck would come up for dinner after all. Lately, he had been spending more and more time in the garage, and when he did come home, he was silent or snappy. Something had changed in their lives, but she couldn't figure out what. Spring twilight was falling on the city. Mariette was returning from her last delivery, 2 rocking chairs for an elderly couple. The sweet old folks had taken a long time to choose a place for them in their living room, thanked her, and offered her tea. She declined. She had work to do at home. After parking the company truck at the office, Mariette got into her old Ford. She twisted her neck. It had been a long day and her muscles were stiff. At times like this, she envied Sarah, who sat in a warm office all day. Although, no, Mariette couldn't stand a sedentary job. She loved being on the move, meeting people, and being alone with herself behind the wheel. Her phone buzzed with a message. Duck. Don't wait for me today. Important order. Well, no surprise there. He'd been spending more and more time in the garage over the last month. Maybe things were really looking up? Although something told her it wasn't about the orders, he had started asking for money too often and reacted too nervously to questions. It was about a 20-minute drive home. Mariette turned on the radio. The weather forecast was on. They promised warmer weather, real spring. She smiled. She loved this time of year when nature was waking up and the air smelled of melting snow and the first grass. She slowed down near her house. There was an unfamiliar car in the driveway, an old Chevrolet covered in mud. Strange, people usually came to see Doc in nicer cars. But what did it matter? Probably just another client. Mariette got out of the car and smoothed her red hair, which had been tousled by the wind all day. The air smelled damp, and a light drizzle was falling from the sky. She shivered and hurried to the porch, taking out her keys as she went. She heard footsteps as she reached the porch. They were quick and heavy. Someone was running behind her. Before she could turn around, a sharp blow to her back threw her against the door. Something cold splashed on her neck and ran down her collar. At first, she didn't even understand what was happening. Then the pain came. It was as if she had been dipped in boiling water. Her skin burned, melted, and dripped. A scream stuck in her throat. She gasped for air, unable to make a sound. She fell to her knees, trying to wipe the burning torture from her face. It only got worse. Now her hands were burning too. Through the noise in her ears, she heard an engine start and tires screech on wet asphalt. Someone was screaming. Her neighbor, she thought. Then everything merged into one endless wail of sirens. She woke up in intensive care. A white ceiling, the beeping of instruments, the smell of medicine. Her face and neck were bandaged, and every breath was painful. The nurse was saying something about an IV and painkillers. Mariette tried to ask about Duck, but her throat wouldn't work. He came the next day. He stood in the doorway, shifting from foot to foot. "The doctors say you'll live," he said instead of a greeting. I'll come back later." Later was 3 days later. He brought oranges and put them on the bedside table. He sat down on the edge of the bed without looking at her. The police came. They didn't find anything, no witnesses, no car. They say it might have been a random attack. Mariette just blinked. It was still too painful to speak. Random? A man had been waiting for her outside her house. He knew when she would be back. Doc had come by several times before, always briefly, always with awkward gifts. And then the procedures began and she had no time for visits. The bandage changes became daily torture. Remove the bandages, clean the wounds, apply new bandages. The doctor said something about second and third degree burns, plastic surgery, and a long recovery. She listened half-heartedly. The pain dulled all her other senses. Her colleagues visited often, bringing fruit, magazines, and news from work. Sarah cried, and the director promised to keep her job. Mariette nodded, trying to smile with her bandaged lips. She vaguely remembered her first glance in the mirror. She thinks she screamed. She thinks the nurse called a psychiatrist. Then there were pills, lots of pills, and endless hospital corridors from one specialist to another. The days merged into a single white streak, marked by procedures and rounds. Morning, bandages. Day, IVs. Evening, injections. Night, nightmares in which she relived that moment on the porch over and over again. 2 weeks later, some of the bandages were removed. She learned to eat, drink, and speak all over again. Her skin was tight across her face and every movement was painful. But the main thing was that she was alive. The doctors said she was lucky that the chemical hadn't gotten into her eyes. Dak began to visit less and less. His visits became shorter, his conversations more strained. One day she noticed a long blonde hair on his shirt. Hers were red. Mariette returned home at the end of April. The apple trees in the garden had already blossomed, covering the path with white petals. Duck met her at the door and helped her carry her bag of hospital things inside. The house smelled of dust. "I cleaned up a bit," he muttered, looking away. Cleaned up meant pizza boxes and empty beer cans piled in the corner. Mariette slowly sank into an armchair. After the sterile hospital, the house seemed strange and uncomfortable. Or had she changed? The first few days merged into an endless series of procedures. Ointments, compresses, special bandages. The doctors wrote a whole list of prescriptions. Dak tried to help, but his touch was awkward and hurried. He no longer looked her in the face. "Should we order something to eat?" he asked in the evenings. "It's hard to cook." Cooking was indeed hard. Every movement was painful. Her skin tightened like a mask. But it was even harder to see her husband wince when she walked past him. He now spent all day in the garage. "Orders," he would say curtly. Money was rare and disappeared quickly. Once she found a check from some bar in his jacket pocket, for a decent amount. "I treated a client," he dismissed her. "We've got a big order coming in." If there was an order, it had vanished into thin air, like everything else lately. Sarah called every day with office news. Mariette listened, occasionally distracted by the itching under her bandages. Her body was healing slowly, reluctantly. At night she woke up from phantom burning. "You need to get out of the house," Sarah said. "Come to the office. The girls miss you." Mariette just shook her head. Leaving the house had become torture, not because of the pain, but because of the stares. People tried not to stare, but she could feel their curiosity through her skin. The pity in her neighbor's eyes was worse than chemical burns. In early May, Duck didn't come home for the first time. He called in the morning, his voice hoarse and slurred. "I fell asleep in the garage," he lied unconvincingly. "I had a lot of work to do." She didn't say anything. What could she say? Her husband was coming home later and later and leaving earlier and earlier. Sometimes he smelled of women's perfume, a cloyingly sweet scent like vanilla pudding. One morning she found a long blonde hair in the bathroom. There had never been hair like that in their house before. Duck snapped at her more and more often over little things. She put a cup in the wrong place, turned the TV too loud. He nitpicked every little thing as if looking for a reason to argue. "Maybe we should see a psychologist," she suggested one evening. "What the hell for?" he snapped. "So some smart-ass can teach me how to live. Everything's fine." Fine was his favorite word in recent weeks. But nothing was fine, just like the money he claimed to be earning in the garage. In mid-May, she decided to go to the store. She put on a wide-brimmed hat, dark glasses, and a closed jacket. The saleswoman recognized her anyway. The whole neighborhood was gossiping about the incident. "Poor thing," she heard behind her. "She used to be so beautiful." At home, Mariette stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Her pink, brownish skin glistened, covered with scars. The scars ran from her face to her neck, shoulders, and chest. The doctors said it would get better with time. But how much time would that take? By the end of May, Duck had stopped coming home for dinner. He would just call and say, "I'm in the garage," and hang up. She stopped cooking for two. At night, lying awake, Mariette replayed the events of the last few months in her mind. Something was slipping away from her understanding, some important detail. Something had happened before the attack. Something had changed in their lives. But what? A call from the insurance company caught her off guard. A polite voice on the line informed her of an appointment. Something about an insurance claim. She didn't even know she had such insurance. She first met Lovely at the supermarket. A tall blonde in a pink top was trying on sunglasses in front of the mirror near the checkout. Around her neck hung a badge from Joe's roadside diner. "Oh, I'm sorry," the girl sang, bumping into Mariette's basket. She immediately recoiled when she saw her face. Mariette turned away as usual, hiding the scars behind her collar. But the blonde continued to stare, her pink-painted mouth slightly open. "Are you the one? The one who got attacked?" She leaned forward. "I recognized you by your eyes. They're so unusual." Mariette nodded silently and moved to another cash register. A strange feeling came over her at the sight of this girl, as if a slight chill ran down her spine. A week later, she saw her again, this time near their house. The blonde was coming out of the garage, smoothing her tousled hair. Noticing Mariette, she froze for a moment, then waved her hand with feigned cheerfulness. "Hi, I'm here, to order something from your husband. He's such a great craftsman." She smelled of vanilla pudding. That evening, Mariette asked her husband about the strange visitor. "Oh, that's lovely," he shrugged. "A customer. She needs something machined for her car." "What exactly?" "Who knows?" he snapped. "Am I supposed to report every order?" After that, Lovely began to appear more often. She would park her car outside the house or flash by in a pink blur in the garage window. Once, Mariette heard her laughter, high-pitched and ringing like breaking glass. "You know," she said to her husband over dinner, "your client is here too often." "So what?" Duck pushed his plate away. "Don't you have anything better to do than spy on me?" "I'm not spying, Just what?" He stood up abruptly. "Do you think I don't see you staring out the window, checking my pockets?" "I don't check." "Get lost!" He slammed his fist on the table. "I'm sick of your jealousy." He left, slamming the door behind him. He returned after midnight, reeking of alcohol and vanilla pudding. Lovely no longer hid. She greeted him with feigned joy, asking about his health in a sickly sweet voice, and she hung around the garage the whole time. "Oh, Duck is such a handy man," she chirped to her neighbor. "He's got golden hands and such a kind personality. Kind." Mariette smiled bitterly. Lately, her husband seemed to be deliberately looking for a fight. She looked at him the wrong way, said the wrong thing. He nitpicked every little thing and snapped at her for every word. "Maybe you should see a doctor," she suggested one day. "You've been acting weird lately." "A shrink?" he asked, narrowing his eyes angrily. "You go see one. Look at yourself. You're the one who looks like a shrink." She didn't say anything. What was the point of arguing? Doc seemed to be deliberately provoking her into a fight so he could blame her for everything. And then the calls started. The phone rang at night, and when Mariette answered there was silence, or quiet giggling, like the sound of broken glass. One morning she found an envelope in the mailbox. Inside was a photograph. Duck and Lovely were embracing near a bar. On the back was written in pink lipstick, "He's mine now." Mariette tore the photo into small pieces. She sat down on the porch, staring at the apple trees. The trees had already blossomed and tiny green fruits were forming on the branches. Everything was going on as usual, blossoming, fruiting, withering. Duck showed up in the morning, looking disheveled and angry. He saw her on the porch and grimaced. "Why aren't you sleeping? Are you watching me?" "Watching who?" she asked, looking up. "You and that." "Lovely?" "You wish you were watching us," he suddenly yelled. "Yes, she's young. Yes, she's beautiful. And have you looked in the mirror lately?" She had, every morning, at her pink, shiny skin, at the scars, at the marks, at her new face, which so frightened her husband. "You know what?" she said quietly. "You should go to her, since she's so beautiful." "No way." He kicked the porch railing. "This is my house. If you don't like it, get out." That evening she thought about divorce for the first time. The crash of the wardrobe woke her at dawn. At first, Mariette thought it was part of a dream, one of the nightmares that still haunted her at night. But the clatter of falling hangers was all too real. "Get up!" Duck kicked the bed. "Get up," I said. He paced around the room like a caged animal. He pulled out drawers, emptied their contents onto the floor, and kicked the scattered items. His face, which always resembled a beetle, now seemed completely foreign. "What's wrong?" Mariette sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. "What happened?" He turned around sharply. "What happened is that I can't take it anymore. I can't stand seeing your ugly face from morning till night. I can't stand your suspicions. I can't—" He choked on his words, grabbed a pile of her dresses and threw them out the open window. The morning breeze caught the light fabric and swirled it over the garden. "Doc," she stood up, holding onto the wall. "Let's talk calmly." "Talk?" He laughed hysterically. "About what? About how you follow me. About how you follow me around. How you annoy me with your questions." Another pile of clothes flew out the window. Then her shoes, her makeup bag, her scarves. Everything he could get his hands on flew down into the dew-covered grass. "I'm not following you." She tried to grab her sweater from him. "Shut up!" He pushed her away. "Just shut up! You disgust me, do you hear me? Disgusting!" His shout echoed off the walls. In the ensuing silence, she could hear a door slam downstairs, light footsteps on the stairs, the familiar smell of vanilla. "Honey, I brought you some coffee." Lovely froze in the doorway. "Oh, what's this?" She stopped short when she saw the devastated room. Her pink tank top was too revealing for early morning, and she was holding a tray with steaming cups. "Oh, it's you." Duck seemed to calm down. "Come in, honey. I'm just dealing with the past." Mariette looked at them, her rumpled, disheveled husband and the radiant blonde with the tray. A strange thought was spinning in her head, but she couldn't quite grasp it. "All right," Duck turned to her. "I'll give you an hour. Get out of here. This is my house, and I have the right to live here with whomever I want." "Your house?" She shook her head. "We bought it together. We're paying the mortgage together." "Yeah?" He started to get worked up again. "And who's been paying for the last few months?" "Me. While you were lying in the hospital, I worked my ass off. And anyway—" He stopped, but Mariette wasn't listening anymore. Something scratched her memory. The hospital, the job, something important. "Here, take this." Lovely handed her a cup of coffee. "You need to calm down." The cup smelled of vanilla, like Lovely's perfume, like that evening when she was attacked. It had smelled sweet then, too, or had she imagined it? "Get out of here." Duck began pacing the room again. "Grab your clothes and get out. You disgust me." "Do you hear me? Disgusting." Mariette slowly sank down onto the bed. Her head was spinning. Her thoughts were jumbled. Everything that was happening seemed unreal, like the nightmares that tormented her at night. "I said get out of here." He grabbed her by the shoulder. "I don't want to see you here in an hour." His fingers dug painfully into her scars. Mariette twisted away and stood up. She went to the window. Down below, on the damp grass, lay her belongings. Dresses, blouses, underwear, everything he had managed to throw out. "Fine," she said, turning back to them. "I'll leave. But remember, this isn't the end." "Are you threatening me?" He took a step toward her. "Who would want you, you ugly bitch?" Lovely giggled quietly, covering her mouth with her hand. Her long blonde hair glistened in the morning light like polished coins. "I'll help you gather your things," she cooed. "Right, Duck?" "I'm so kind." Mariette silently began to pack what was left in the closet into her bag. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to act calmly and methodically. Underwear, documents, money, phone, charger, pills. "Hurry up!" Duck kicked the bag. "I've got things to do." She nodded, zipped the bag shut. She picked up the bag and headed for the door. She turned around at the threshold. Lovely had already made herself comfortable on the bed, her long legs stretched out on the rumpled blanket. Down in the garden, the wind ruffled the scattered dresses. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled. A new day was beginning. Eudora lived on the other side of town, in an old neighborhood with narrow streets and small houses. Her tiny house was hidden in an overgrown garden, The owner loved flowers and was always bringing home new seedlings from somewhere. "You can stay with me," she said decisively, taking Mariette's bag. "Stay as long as you need to." The small guest bedroom smelled of lavender and old books. Eudora, a high school chemistry teacher, kept her library here. Rows of worn volumes rose from the floor to the ceiling. "Make yourself comfortable," she said, gathering a stack of notebooks from the armchair. "The bathroom is over there, and you know where the kitchen is. There are clean sheets in the closet." Mariette sank onto the narrow bed. The events of the morning seemed unreal, like a bad dream, but her knuckles, which she had scraped raw when frantically stuffing her things into her bag, stung noticeably. "I'll make some tea," Eudora said, pausing in the doorway. "And don't you dare apologize or thank me. You would have done the same for me." Mariette nodded. They had been friends since school, a long, time-tested friendship. Eudora had been there when Mariette's parents died. She had helped her move when she married Daka. She visited her in the hospital after the attack. The next few days passed strangely, as if in a dream. In the morning, Eudora would leave for school, leaving breakfast and keys behind. Mariette wandered around the house, trying to get used to her new reality. She read old detective novels from the bookshelves. She helped her friend check her notebooks. Occasionally, she went out into the garden. There, among the flowers, it was easier to breathe. On the third day, she went to see a lawyer. A short, sparrow-like man studied her documents for a long time, frowning and making notes. "So," he said finally, "the house is jointly owned, and the mortgage is also joint. The car is yours. The documents are in order. The bills." He rustled through some papers. "And the bills are almost empty. Where did the money go?" Mariette shrugged. For the last few months, Duck had been managing the finances himself. She had been too preoccupied with her treatment to keep track of expenses. "All right," the lawyer took off his glasses. "We'll prepare the divorce papers. But keep in mind that if your husband objects, the process will be lengthy." She nodded. Let it be lengthy. There was no need to rush. That evening, Sarah called. News travels fast in a small town. "How are you?" Her friend's voice sounded genuinely concerned. "Do you need anything?" "No, thank you." Mariette rubbed her temples wearily. "Everything's fine, really." On the fifth day, she went to the hospital for a scheduled checkup with the surgeon. The waiting room was crowded and stuffy. She sat in a corner, trying not to notice the curious glances. "It's healing well," the doctor muttered, examining the scars. "But you need to continue the treatment. Here are some new medications." She took the prescription and walked out into the hallway. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Potter?" a polite female voice asked. "This is New Life Insurance. Regarding your insurance claim." "Yes, I'm listening." Mariette stopped in the middle of the hallway. "We have reviewed your case. All the documents are in order. We would like to schedule an appointment to discuss the details of the payment. Would tomorrow be convenient for you?" "Payment?" she frowned. "I'm sorry, but I don't remember taking out insurance." "The policy was taken out in your name in February of this year," the woman said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Life and health insurance. Premium class. Didn't your husband tell you?" Mariette slowly sank down onto a bench against the wall. February, a month before the attack, and Dak hadn't said a word about insurance. "What time tomorrow?" she asked, feeling a lump in her throat. "Would 10 o'clock be okay? Please bring all your medical records and reports. And yes, I advise you to bring a lawyer." That evening, she told Eudora everything. She was silent for a long time, biting the frame of her glasses. "You know," she said finally, "something's not right here. Where did Doc get the money for premium insurance? He was always complaining about being broke." Mariette nodded. The thought had been bothering her all day. She hardly slept that night. She tossed and turned on the narrow bed. going over the events of the last few months in her mind. Her husband's strange behavior, his sudden absences, the debts he hadn't mentioned, and this unexpected insurance policy. In the morning, Duck called. "I heard you went to see a lawyer," he began without greeting her. "Are you seriously thinking about getting a divorce?" "What did you think?" She tried to sound calm. "Listen." His voice became insinuating. "Maybe we can work things out. I got carried away. It happens to everyone. Come back home, will you?" "Why?" She looked out the window at the dew-covered garden. "So you can continue seeing Lovely in front of me?" "What does Lovely have to do with it?" He began to get angry. "I'm sorry. Or do you want money? Do you think you'll get a lot in the divorce?" "Why didn't you tell me about the insurance?" she asked bluntly. There was silence on the line. Then there was a click. Dak had hung up. She slowly put down the phone. Outside the window, the city was waking up. Cars were honking. Dogs were barking. Children were shouting. It was a normal morning on a normal day. Only she was about to find out something important, something that could change everything. She went to the insurance company with a lawyer. A sparrow-like man took notes in his notebook and shook his head the whole way there. "We need to study the policy carefully," he muttered. "Very carefully." The spacious New Life office gleamed with glass and chrome. A polite secretary showed them into a meeting room. The manager, a young woman in a strict suit, laid out the documents on the table. "So, Mrs. Potter," she began, "let's discuss the details of your payment." The amount was enormous. Mariette counted the zeros on the document several times, unable to believe her eyes. She had never seen so much money. Even their house was worth several times less. "The payment will be made in 2 installments," the manager explained. "The first is compensation for medical expenses already incurred. The second is the principal amount for the damage to your health. The funds will be transferred to your account within 3 business days." The lawyer scribbled something in his notebook, occasionally adjusting his slipping glasses. Mariette listened half-heartedly, her mind racing with strange thoughts. Where did Duck get the money for such expensive insurance? Why did he hide its existence? "Sign here, here, and here," the manager said, pushing the documents toward her. Leaving the office, she stood on the porch for a long time, watching the cars go by. 3 days. In 3 days, she would be a rich woman. Or maybe she already was. The money just hadn't been deposited into her account yet. Duck was the first to call. He must have had his own sources at the insurance company. "I know about the payment," he began without preamble. "We need to talk." "About what?" She got into the car but didn't rush to start the engine. "About the money, of course. It's our money. I paid the premiums." "From what?" she asked. "You were always complaining about being broke." "It doesn't matter," he snapped. "What matters is that half of the payout belongs to me. By law." She was silent, watching the passers-by through the car window. A young mother with a stroller, an old man with a dog, a couple of teenagers with ice cream. Ordinary people, ordinary lives. "Are you listening?" Duck raised his voice. "I want my share." "No." "What do you mean, no?" He was almost shouting. "I'll take you to court. I won't give you a divorce until I get my money." "Your money?" She smiled. "The money is compensation for the harm done to me. To me, not you." "Who would want you?" he yelled. "You think you can find someone else with your burned face? You're scary to look at after being doused with lye." Mariette froze. There was silence on the line. Duck also realized he had said too much. "I didn't say I was doused with lye," she said slowly. "I didn't tell anyone what I was doused with. How do you know?" The phone rang. She sat there, clutching the steering wheel with white knuckles. Her temples were throbbing. Lie. He knew about the lie. He had known all along. She returned to Eudora's house at dusk. Her friend was waiting for her on the porch. "Well?" she asked. helping her carry the grocery bags inside. "The money will come in 3 days," Mariette said as she walked into the kitchen. "And also, Duck knows. He knew from the beginning." "What?" "What they poured on me." Eudora froze with the teapot in her hands. "But that means—" "Yes." Mariette sat down at the table. "It means he was directly involved in the attack." The phone was ringing off the hook. Duck, duck again, and again. Then a text message. "We need to talk," followed by another. "I'll explain everything." And finally, "You'll regret it if you don't pick up." By nightfall, the calls had stopped. But then Lovely showed up, rushing over in her car, banging on the door, shouting something about love and forgiveness. Eudora called the police, and the noise outside stopped. In the morning, a message came from an unknown number. "No one will prove anything, but there could be problems, big problems." Mariette deleted the message. She took the folder with the insurance company documents out of her bag. She slowly flipped through the pages. February. The policy was issued in February, a month before the attack, and then she finally cried. The money arrived in her account on Tuesday. Mariette was sitting in the garden helping Eudora replant some intricate flowers when she received a message from the bank. She didn't even bother to open it. She knew what it was. "You know what's strange?" Eudora shook the dirt off her gloves. Duck didn't just know about the lie. He planned everything in advance: insurance, the attack, now these threats. But he slipped up on such a small detail. Mariette nodded. All morning she had been going over the events of the last few months in her mind, and the picture was gradually coming together. His debts, which he never mentioned, the strange absences, the late-night phone calls, and then Lovely showed up, just after he realized his plan was falling apart. "Do you think he took a mistress on purpose?" she asked, watching her friend wield the shovel. "Of course," Eudora snorted. "To make it easier to kick you out. You know how it is. A husband leaves for a young beauty. All the neighbors gossip about it, and no one even thinks about the strange coincidence of events. There was a logic to it." Lovely's appearance distracted everyone's attention from the main thing, the carefully planned assassination. Everyone was talking about the unfaithful husband and his young girlfriend, feeling sorry for the poor burned wife. It was the perfect cover. By evening, an impressive stack of papers had appeared on Eudora's desk. They had methodically collected all the documents: insurance policy, medical reports, hospital bills, Daka's bank statements, thanks to the family lawyer who didn't refuse the request. The history of his calls. Sarah helped here, as she had unexpected connections at the phone company. "Look," Eudora ran her finger down the printout. "These calls, same number, always late at night. They started a month before the attack and stopped right after. And you know what? The number is registered to some Randy Smith. Guess where he works?" "Where?" "The same diner where your Lovely works part-time." Mariette leaned back in her chair. The circle was closing. Duck had found the hitman through Lovely. Or was it the other way around? Had he found Lovely through the hitman? It didn't matter. What mattered was that they were all connected. There was a knock at the door. Their lawyer had arrived, the same sparrow-like man. He studied the documents for a long time, shaking his head and making notes in his notebook. "So," he said finally, "the picture is quite clear. Your husband took out insurance in advance. He conspired with a certain individual to cause you serious bodily harm. After you received a large insurance payout, he tried to force you to share the money through threats and blackmail. I think it's time to file a report with the police." Mariette nodded silently. She was thinking about something else, how easily Duck had decided to do this. He just went ahead and planned an attempt on his own wife's life. For money? Or was there something else? It took a long time to write the statement. The lawyer insisted on a detailed account of everything, from taking out the insurance to the latest threats. They attached copies of documents, printouts of phone calls, and threatening messages. "Now comes the hardest part," he said, putting the papers in his briefcase. "We need him to confess. Without that, we only have circumstantial evidence." "I have an idea," Mariette said slowly. "He still thinks I'm just guessing. He doesn't know we have the documents. What do you suggest?" "I'll call him. I'll say I agree to meet and discuss the division of the money. He'll probably start threatening me. I'll turn on the tape recorder." Eudora and the lawyer exchanged glances. "That's dangerous," her friend shook her head. "He could get aggressive." "That's why we'll meet in a crowded place." Mariette took out her phone. "In a cafe on the main square. There are always lots of people there." She dialed the number and turned on the speakerphone. One ring, two. On the fifth ring, Duck picked up. "Hello?" His voice sounded wary. "Hi," she tried to sound calm. "We need to talk. About money." The cafe on the main square was always crowded, especially at lunchtime. Mariette chose a table by the window, took out her phone with the voice recorder on, and hid it in the folds of a napkin. She sat down so that her face was in the shadows. She didn't want to attract the attention of other patrons with her scars. Duck was 20 minutes late. He plopped down on a chair and ordered coffee without even looking at the waitress. "Well," he grumbled. "Decided to share?" "Explain first," she said, trying to sound calm. "How did you find out about the lie?" "What does it matter?" He shrugged. "Maybe the doctors told you." "The doctors only spoke to me. I didn't tell anyone about the chemical." "Listen," he leaned forward. "Let's be honest. You don't need this money. Where are you going with that?" He hesitated. "Anyway, give me half and we'll part ways amicably." "Or else what?" She watched his fingers nervously fiddle with the napkin. "Or else there will be trouble." He lowered his voice. "Big trouble. Anything could happen. An accident, for example. Like the one with the lie?" He flinched as if he had been struck. Then he grinned. "Prove it." "You can't prove anything. You think you're so smart. I've thought this through. And that's just a coincidence. You found something to pick on. Lie, not lie. You took out insurance a month before the attack. So what? I have the right to. With your last money? Even if it was on credit," he almost shouted. You. In short, either you share it nicely or you'll be sorry. And don't think I did this all by myself. There are people like that. Anyway, make up your mind." Mariette stood up silently. Duck grabbed her by the arm. "Where are you going? We haven't finished talking." "We're done," she said, pulling her arm away. "And it's all been recorded." The police station greeted her with the smell of coffee and the hum of the air conditioner. Detective Rogers, a middle-aged man with a tired face, laid out a printout of the conversation on the table. "This is enough," he said, tapping his pencil on the papers. "He basically admitted that he knew about the attack. Now we need to find out who carried it out." Daka was arrested that same evening right in the garage where he was packing some things into boxes. Lovely was found at Joe's diner, where she was finishing her shift. The blonde didn't hold out long during questioning. Within an hour, she broke down and told everything about Daka's conspiracy with Randy, about the planning of the attack, about her role as a diversion. "He promised we'd be rich," she sobbed, smearing mascara across her cheeks. "He said we just had to wait for the money to come in, and then we'd get rid of that. Mrs. Potter. I didn't know what he was going to do to her. I thought he was just going to scare her." Mariette looked at her through the interrogation room glass and felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Just exhaustion. Randy was arrested the next morning while trying to buy a bus ticket to a neighboring state. Almost all the money Duck had paid him for the attack was found in his luggage. "Fucking bastard," Detective Rogers muttered, leafing through the statements. "Excuse my language, but to do that to his own wife." Duck remained silent until the very end. He sat in his cell, refused a lawyer, and demanded to see Mariette. When he was shown the statements made by Lovely and Randy, He turned pale but continued to insist that he knew nothing. He only broke down during the confrontation, when Randy vividly described how Duck had instructed him where to wait for Mariette, what time she would be home, and what liquid to use. "I didn't want it to turn out like this," he muttered, staring at the floor. "I thought it would just be a burn, a minor one. But look at it now." Mariette left the room silently. Eudora was waiting for her in the hallway. She had arrived as soon as she heard about the arrests. "Let's go home," she said, putting her arm around Mariette's shoulders. "That's enough for today." The phone rang in the car. It was Detective Rogers. "Mrs. Potter? We have some more information. We found some documents in your husband's garage. It looks like this isn't his first insurance scam. Could you come by tomorrow?" She promised she would. She hung up and closed her eyes. The story wasn't over yet, but the worst was behind her. Or was it? The worst happened that evening on the porch. Everything else was just the aftermath. The attempted murder shook the entire town. The newspapers were full of headlines. "Husband organizes attack on wife for insurance money. Acid attack. Sensational details." Mariette stopped reading them after the first article, but her neighbors helpfully recounted every new publication. The first court hearing was scheduled for early June. Mariette arrived early, wanting to avoid the crowd of onlookers outside the courthouse, but their car still got stuck in traffic caused by journalists and curious townspeople. "There they are," she heard as she walked toward the courtroom, "the one with the burns. And in handcuffs, her husband." Duck walked between two guards hunched over, staring at the floor. He was wearing a wrinkled shirt, probably one of the few things he had managed to gather before his arrest. Randy followed behind, turning his head and grinning at the cameras. Lovely was brought in separately. She had managed to dye her hair brown, as if hoping no one would recognize her. She clung to her lawyer, hiding her face behind large dark glasses. The courtroom was stuffy. The judge, a heavy-set middle-aged woman, carefully studied the case file. The prosecutor laid out papers, repeatedly adjusting his tie. "Case number 234, began the clerk. "Dak Potter, Randy Smith, and Lovely Leslie are charged with intentionally causing serious bodily harm with the intent to obtain insurance money." Dak was questioned first. He spoke quietly, indistinctly, constantly confusing his testimony. He claimed that he just wanted to scare his wife, then admitted to planning the attack, then denied everything again. "And when did you come up with this plan?" asked the prosecutor. "I don't remember exactly. In January, I think. We were having money problems, a big debt. And then Randy told me about a case where a guy insured his wife and then—" "Enough," the judge interrupted. "The defendant's case is clear. Call the next defendant." Randy was relaxed. He laughed as he recounted how Duck had looked for someone to carry out the attack, how he had haggled over the price, and how he had given instructions about the time and place of the attack. "And who came up with the idea of using lye?" the prosecutor asked. "Duck, of course," Randy chuckled. "He said the burn had to be serious, or the insurance wouldn't cover it. I wanted to use acid, but he insisted on lye. He said it would be more reliable." Someone gasped in the courtroom. Mariette sat motionless, staring straight ahead. Only her fingers clenched around her purse were white with tension. Lovely was crying during the interrogation. She smeared her mascara, sobbed, and stumbled over her words. But the gist of her testimony was simple. She had agreed to help Daku divert attention from the assassination attempt by pretending to be his mistress. "He promised it would be easy," she sobbed. "Just pretend we're having an affair. And then we'd split the insurance money. I didn't know. I didn't think." By the end of the hearing, Mariette's head was splitting. The details of the crime, emerging one after another, formed a gruesome picture of a cold-blooded assassination. "The court will now retire to consider the sentence," the judge announced. "The next hearing will be in a week." Detective Rogers called that evening. "I have news," he said. "We found something else in the documents from the garage. It looks like your husband was planning an insurance scam 2 years ago. It didn't work out then. The company refused to insure you without a medical examination." Mariette listened silently. 2 years. He had been planning this for 2 years. "And there's more," the detective added. Randy started talking. "It looks like there was a whole group involved in similar scams. We're checking other cases now." She thanked him and hung up. Outside, the summer evening was bustling with children playing, dogs barking and cars passing by. Life went on as usual. The phone rang again. This time it was Daka's lawyer. "My client wants to make a deal with the investigation," he said in an official tone. "He is willing to testify against the entire group in exchange for a reduced sentence." "That's not my job," she replied. "Talk to the prosecutor." The last court hearing began at the end of July. The heat was unbearable, and the old air conditioner in the courtroom hummed loudly but was barely effective. Mariette sat by the window watching the clouds float across the sky. After 2 months of court proceedings, she had almost grown accustomed to this room, to the creaking chairs, to the whispers behind her back. She had grown accustomed to the sight of Duck in handcuffs, gaunt, aged with a blank stare. To the sobs of Lovely, who now dyed her hair mouse brown and dressed in modest dark dresses. To the smug grin of Randy, who seemed completely oblivious to the seriousness of the situation. The prosecutor spoke at length. He listed the evidence, read out witness statements, and presented documents. He paused to focus on the insurance policy, the very one that had started it all. "The crime was carefully planned," his voice boomed from the ceiling. "The defendant, Potter, didn't just organize an attack on his own wife. He spent years planning this scam. He looked for ways to do it, picked people to help him, waited for the right moment." Duck sat with his head down. His lawyer jotted things down in his notebook from time to time, but it was clear he didn't have much hope. "As aggravating circumstances," the prosecutor continued, "the particular cruelty of the crime should be taken into account. The choice of lie as a weapon was made deliberately, with the aim of causing maximum harm to the victim's health." Mariette mechanically touched the scar on her neck. The skin still itched sometimes, especially in the heat. The doctors said it would go away with time. Maybe. The defense attorney spoke briefly. Daka's lawyer emphasized his client's sincere confession and cooperation with the investigation. Lovely's lawyer waved documents about her difficult childhood and the bad influence of her criminal environment. Randy refused to say anything, slumped on the bench and chewing gum. "All rise. The court is in session," said the clerk. The judge read the sentence in an even, emotionless voice. 15 years for Daka for organizing the assassination attempt. 12 years for Randy as the perpetrator. 5 years for Lovely for aiding and abetting, with a stay of execution due to pregnancy. Pregnancy? Mariette shuddered. She looked at her husband's former lover, who was hiding her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. So that was why she had been wearing such baggy dresses lately. "In addition," the judge continued, "the court has ordered the defendants to pay compensation for moral damages in the amount of—" The sum was impressive. Even with the insurance payout, the money could provide Mariette with a comfortable life for many years to come. But Duck had long since spent all his savings. Randy had nothing but an old car, and Lovely had nothing but credit card debt. "Defendant Potter," the judge addressed Duck, "do you have anything to say to the victim?" He slowly stood up. He turned to Mariette and looked her in the eyes for the first time during the entire trial. His voice was hoarse and broken. "I didn't think it would turn out like this. I'm telling the truth. I just wanted money, a lot of money, and then everything went haywire. Randy said we had to play it safe, and Lovely came along at just the right moment. He talked and talked, as if a dam had burst, about his debts, his fear of creditors, his envy of other people's wealth, about how easy it had been to cross the line, how easy it had been to convince himself that it was just a business plan, how imperceptibly the line between fraud and attempted murder had disappeared. Mariette listened silently. She thought about how she had never really known this man. She had lived with him for 10 years, slept in the same bed, shared bread and salt, and hadn't noticed how this monster had grown inside him. "The court is adjourned," the judge banged his gavel. The guards led the condemned men away. Lovely, stumbling in her high heels, glanced back at Duck one last time. He didn't even notice. Randy whistled a tune. The footsteps and voices in the hall gradually faded away. "Let's go home," Eudora said quietly, taking her friend by the arm. Mariette nodded. Home. To where roses bloomed in the garden, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee and book dust filled the air, where she didn't have to pretend or hide her scars. She walked down the courtroom corridor, feeling the stares on her, curious, sympathetic, judgmental. But now, those stares no longer hurt. All the worst was behind her. Mariette made her first appointment with a plastic surgeon a week after the trial. Dr. Hendricks, an elderly man with a neatly trimmed beard, studied her scars for a long time, jotting something down in his notebook and shaking his head. "It will take several operations," he said finally. "Modern technology can work wonders, but it takes time. And of course, a considerable amount of money." Mariette silently took the insurance documents out of her bag. The doctor's eyes widened slightly when he saw the amount. "Well," he cleared his throat, "in that case, we can consider the most advanced techniques, including experimental developments from Switzerland. How would you feel about starting in 2 weeks?" That evening she told Eudora everything. They sat in the garden in old wicker chairs. The air smelled of jasmine and freshly cut grass. Eudora thoughtfully swirled her glass of wine. "You know what?" she said suddenly. "Since you're going under the knife anyway, why not make yourself the way you've always wanted to be?" Mariette looked at her friend in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean it." Eudora put down her glass. "You always said you wanted your eyes to be a little different, and your cheekbones higher, and your nose a little thinner. Now you have the opportunity. You have the money, you have the doctor, why not?" Mariette was silent, staring at the darkening sky. Crickets chirped in the jasmine bushes, and a dog barked somewhere in the distance. It was a typical summer evening, but her thoughts were unusual. "I'll think about it," she said finally. She thought about it for 3 days. She looked through old photos from before the attack. She stared at her former face. Beautiful? Probably. Ordinary? Definitely. Just the way nature made her. On the 4th day, she went back to Dr. Hendricks. "I want to discuss something," she said, sitting down in the chair. "Not just recovery, but changes." He listened attentively, took out his tablet, and began showing her some appearance modeling programs. "It's entirely feasible," he nodded. "It's even logical. Since we're working with tissue, we can do everything you want right away. But I'll repeat, it will require several surgeries and rehabilitation between them." "How long will it take?" "At least 6 months. Maybe more." "I agree." The first operation was scheduled for August. The heat had subsided, and there was already a hint of autumn in the air. Mariette packed a small bag with her things. She would be spending at least a week in the clinic. "I'll visit every day," said Eudora, hugging her at the operating room door. "I know," Mariette smiled, "and thank you for the idea." She remembered only the smell of medicine and the anesthesiologist's mask. Then she woke up in the ward with a dull pain and bandages on her face. The first few days merged into one endless corridor of procedures, injections, and dressings. A week later, the bandages were removed. Mariette stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. Her face was swollen. There were bruises under her eyes, but There were already noticeable changes in the contours of her cheekbones. "This is just the beginning," Dr. Hendricks smiled. "You'll see, in 6 months you won't recognize yourself." He was right. One operation followed another: face, neck, shoulders, the latest techniques, experimental drugs, special procedures. The clinic became her second home. She returned there again and again. Between operations, there was rehabilitation, massages, physical therapy, special masks, and creams. Gradually, her skin became softer, the scars faded, and new features became more distinct. Eudora really did come every day, with books, fruit, and news. She talked about her students, the new flowers in her garden, and the latest gossip. She didn't let her get bored or depressed. In December, before the last operation, Mariette received a letter. It was from Dhaka, from prison. She didn't even open it. She threw it straight into the trash. "That's right," Eudora approved. "There's no point in stirring up the past." The last operation was the most difficult, a complex correction of the entire face. Almost 6 hours under anesthesia, 2 weeks in the clinic, a month of rehabilitation. The bandages were removed at the end of January. Mariette stood in front of the mirror, not believing her eyes. A beautiful stranger was looking back at her from the mirror. High cheekbones, slightly slanted eyes, a thin nose, and clear porcelain skin. "Well?" asked Dr. Hendricks. It's amazing," she whispered. "Another month for the final healing," he smiled. "And then we can consider it finished." Spring came early. The first crocuses bloomed in Eudora's garden in February. Mariette sat on the porch, basking in the sun. She no longer needed to hide in the shade, wear closed clothes, or avoid people's gaze. "What next?" Eudora asked one day. "I don't know," Mariette replied honestly. "Maybe I'll leave, start over, in another city with a new identity." "What about your job? Your friends?" "I'll find a job, and real friends will always find a way to stay in touch." In March, she sold the house, the very one where it all happened. The real estate agent was surprised when she saw the new look of the owner, but said nothing. Everyone in their town already knew the story. In April, she bought a small apartment in a seaside town 3 hours away. It was bright, with large windows and a view of the ocean. She began to slowly move her things and settle into her new home. "You know what's most amazing?" she said to Eudora over their farewell dinner. "I'm grateful to him, Daku. If it weren't for his greed and stupidity, I would never have decided to make such changes. I would have remained the same, the good, proper, boring Mariette. And now? Now I'm different, inside and out, and it's great." They sat in the garden for a long time, looking at the stars and making plans. Eudora promised to come for the weekend. Mariette promised to call regularly and send photos from the ocean. The next morning, she got in her car and drove to her new home, to her new life. The rearview mirror reflected an unfamiliar, beautiful face, her new face, a symbol of victory over the past. Ahead lay a road bathed in spring sunshine, and somewhere out there, just around the bend, a new life awaited her, the one she had always dreamed of but never dared to admit even to herself. They say every cloud has a silver lining. Sometimes the most terrible events become the beginning of something beautiful. You just need to find the strength within yourself to get through the pain and not break down, and then start all over again, as a completely different person. Mariette turned on the radio and smiled at her reflection. It was all just beginning.